Welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we're diving into literally the ultimate mystery of human existence. We're looking at exactly how the brain works during death. What actually happens in our neural pathways during our absolute final moments. We're going to unpack some wild scientific data that challenges pretty much everything we thought we knew about the end of life.
For centuries, people who have survived near-death experiences have described these just incredibly vivid phenomena. You've probably heard the stories, right? Passing through a dark tunnel toward a brilliant light, running into deceased loved ones, or having their entire life flash before their eyes. And the wild thing is, these aren't just one-off anecdotes. People across totally different cultures and age groups report the exact same things. They almost always insist that the experience felt, well, more real than everyday reality.
But right here is where we hit a massive scientific paradox. Think about it. How on earth can a brain that is actively shutting down, completely starved of blood flow and oxygen, generate this highly organized, hyperreal state of consciousness? Traditionally, we've always pictured the dying brain as a failing system, just sort of slowly fading to black. But the sheer vividness of these experiences points to a huge surge of activity. So what is our brain actually doing when the clock is running out?
To solve this mystery, we're going to look at 5 key areas. First, the mystery of near-death experiences. Second, gamma oscillations at the time of death. Third, the stages of shutdown and the so-called waves of death. Fourth, why the brain suddenly activates. And finally, the incredibly fine line between life and death.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the mystery of near-death experience.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the hard clinical data to ground these mystical experiences in science. Studies show that roughly 10 to 15% of people who actually survive a cardiac arrest in a hospital setting report having a near-death experience. That is not some tiny fringe anomaly. We are talking about millions of people globally who have biologically crossed that threshold of death, been brought back, and returned with eerily similar stories. In fact, researchers use something called the Grayson NDE scale to measure this. It outlines distinct hallmarks, things like intense memory recall, out-of-body sensations, altered perception of time, and overwhelming feelings of peace or joy. Now, for the longest time, scientists have completely struggled to explain this. How does a brain going through an acute, catastrophic physiological crisis manage to orchestrate such a rich, complex experience?
That leads us perfectly into section 2. Gamma oscillations at the time of death.
Recent breakthroughs in continuous brainwave monitoring have given us a massive clue. But to understand it, we need to quickly talk about gamma oscillations. Basically, these are super fast brainwaves, usually firing between 30 and 100 Hz. They are the neurophysiological signature of a brain that is wide awake and locked in. It's the exact kind of brain activity you have when you're laser focused on a tough puzzle or suddenly recalling a super vivid memory from your childhood.
Okay, so here is where the data just takes a completely shocking turn. When a patient's heart stops, continuous EEG recordings reveal a totally paradoxical surge in these exact gamma waves. Specifically, researchers saw a huge spike of connectivity in the back of the brain, the temporal parietal occipital junctions. That area is basically the brain's hot zone for conscious processing. So get this, immediately after the heart stops, instead of just flatlining right away, the dying brain lights up with the exact electrical signatures we associate with deep conscious thought and memory retrieval. It's mind-blowing.
So how does that even happen? Let's look at section 3, stages of shutdown and waves of death.
We really need to understand how this intense electrical surge fits into the big picture of a failing body. When we actually track a brain's electrical activity during those final moments, it is definitely not a simple fade to black. It's a highly complex, multi-stage sequence that goes all the way from initial oxygen depletion down to absolute cellular death.
Let's break this down chronologically. Right after oxygen is cut off, the brain experiences that massive gamma surge we just talked about. After that, it declines into what's called isoelectricity, which is basically what we think of as a flat line on an EEG monitor. But wait, it doesn't end there. Next comes a massive, sharply contoured electrical spike known by researchers as the wave of death. This is when the brain's cortical neurons undergo massive membrane depolarizations. But here's the craziest part. If oxygen is restored within a specific, tight resuscitation window, you can actually get a wave of resuscitation. The neurons repolarize and recover.
Which brings us to section 4, why does the brain suddenly activate? Seriously, why would an organ that is actively dying and rapidly running out of energy spend its very last reserves to generate such intense, coordinated electrical activity? Well, neuroscientists have 2 main theories. The first is called explosive synchronization. It's this idea that as the brain's network breaks down, it fights back to maintain balance, triggering an abrupt, explosive surge of global connectivity right before the whole system crashes. And during this phase, empirical data shows a massive dump of neurotransmitters. We're talking up to a 250-fold surge in serotonin. That alone could totally explain those peaceful, mystical near-death visions. The second theory is called the percolation process.
The best way to understand the percolation process is to think of a failing city power grid. First, a lack of oxygen randomly breaks down your brain's normal, everyday functional connections. Second, all the remaining electrical energy in your brain is basically forced to route itself through a few highly connected surviving hubs. Think of them as biological shortcuts. And finally, this bottleneck causes a massive temporary surge of information flowing between parts of the brain that usually don't talk to each other. It creates a sudden, intense burst of light and activity right before the final blackout. All of this brings us to our final section, the fine line between life and death. These cutting-edge neurobiological findings are literally forcing scientists to rethink the clinical definition of death. As researchers point out, the mammalian brain is fully capable of generating the neural correlates of active conscious processing right at the near-death state. The brain does not just passively give up and fade away into nothingness, it actively puts on this highly organized final electrical symphony, even as the physical body is crossing the threshold into what we've always called death.
So we're basically looking at entirely new scientific realities here. We now know for sure that a flat scalp EEG does not mean absolute brain death. Deeper brainstem regions might still be totally active. Intracellular recordings prove that massive depolarizations are persisting even during a supposed flatline. And perhaps most incredibly, in one brilliantly designed study on pigs, scientists actually managed to restore cellular and molecular functions in the brain a full 4 hours after the brain went completely silent electrically. 4 hours.
Which leaves us with a truly profound final thought to chew on. Based on all of this evidence, from the paradoxical gamma surges to a 4-hour resuscitation window, is death actually an instantaneous permanent event? Or is it a gradual, complex, and maybe even partially reversible process? As you can see, the way our brain acts at the very end suggests that the transition out of life is far more vibrant and honestly far less final than we ever dared to imagine.